Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Science Fiction Prototyping Podcast. I am Brian David Johnson, the author of the column. This month, we're talking about the Darwin app. This came from a column that I did a few months ago called That Copernican Moment, that moment when everything changes, when you see evidence of a technological or scientific change and you realize that everything that you know and everything in your life changes. And the idea was that we would use science fiction prototypes to get an understanding of what the human impact of that change might be. And I asked you all to send me in your ideas, and I got lots of ideas, and I'm going to try to publish as many of them as I can. But I got one from George, and George sort of talked about using the ideas of evolution, using evolution in technology. And the tenet of evolution is to reproduce and survive, to reproduce and survive. And so we did a little bit of thought experiment in the column and thought about, are there different examples of when you might actually see an app or a Darwin app, an application that's evolving. And we even looked at different science fiction prototypes like Spike Jonze's new movie, Her, about artificial intelligence. So I thought it would be appropriate on the podcast to bring in somebody who's done quite a lot of work when it comes to using science fiction as a development tool, but then also in experience design. We're really lucky this month to have Nathan Shedroff on the program. Nathan is the co-author of a book called Make It So. He wrote it with Chris Nossel. And they use science fiction to explore experience design, explore UI design. And then also the thing about Nathan is that he is an expert in the field of experience design. He was one of the pioneers of thinking about and taking a holistic approach to the design of systems, the design of technology, to really architect the entire experience. So I thought it'd be interesting to have him on the podcast today to talk a little bit about his work on using science fiction and also where he thought we might be going with these new types of apps and these new types of ways that we would be acting and interacting with technology. So let's bring him on. Nathan Shedroff, welcome to the Science Fiction Prototyping column.
It's great to be here, Brian.
So Nathan, this being the Science Fiction Prototyping podcast in our column, in it every month or so we talk about the relationship between science fiction and science fact and how we can use science fiction as a development tool for our technologies. And you've written, I think, really an amazing book on this with your co-author, Chris Nossel, called Make It So. What drove you to want to create that book, and what were the connections that you saw between science fiction and technology development and design?
Well, the project actually started, I think, all the way back in about 89, 90, when I can't even remember the science fiction film I saw at the time, but it had some cool interface in it. And I was just getting into interface design at the time, computer-human interfaces. And I remember thinking, oh, this is kind of cool, especially compared to what we see in the real world. It would be a cool investigation to collect the video clips of all the sort of interfaces we see in science fiction and just have a collection or look at them. And that idea gestated with me all the way up until about 2007, I think, when I decided to do something about this idea and teamed up with my friend Chris Nossel to actually look at science fiction interfaces in a serious way and have a process for doing so. But at that time, even though we knew, we had a hunch there'd be something interesting, but we had no idea what we would find or that it would be so relevant to the real world construction of interfaces.
And what did you find? I mean, as I said, I'm a huge fan of the book, and I think it's helpful not only from a science fiction standpoint and a design standpoint, also from a technology standpoint. What did you learn?
I would put our learnings in sort of two categories. We learned a lot of sort of tactical things. I think the book has 50 lessons in it, and that's just a fraction of everything we looked at. The first category, the biggest, is tactical things about how to design, how technology should work socially or how visually science fiction sort of edges us towards certain kinds of solutions over others. Some things that wow us, some things that point to future technologies. There's a whole set of stuff that is just sort of valuable as an interface designer working on an interface for a software app or something else that, if for no other reason, would spur their creativity and maybe expand in their mind the possibilities of what they're designing. The second category is probably more interesting, and that is that we found a lot of meta lessons that made us realize and actually validated with something that you knew already, which was No, science fiction is a legitimate study and place to study things that are relevant to the real world, not at the level only of interface, but at the level of system interaction, social relationship with technology, etc. And it reminded us that, oh yeah, most of design is actually already fiction, because the kinds of tools we do and we prototype and we iterate, not until the thing that we design actually makes it out to the public does it turn into fact. In addition, a lot of business is fiction too. Anything with the word plan in it hasn't happened yet. It's fiction. And that led us to understand that using fiction like science fiction and storytelling and narrative and all the kinds of prototyping and things that we do directly impact real work, real business, real design work, real products and services, because so much of what we do is already fiction. So borrowing those techniques and borrowing those tools became really natural and entirely valid.
So Nathan, you have a very long history in experience design and experience development, sort of understanding that how we act and interact with our devices is really all based around experience, which is the sum total of many different interactions. And in this month's column, the Darwin app, we look at a couple different examples. We look at the great Spike Jonze movie, Her, as well as some examples of how people might act and interact with devices. And one of the things that's, I think, kind of interesting, both in Her and the Darwin app that we talk about, is it's kind of a screenless interface. I know that a lot of the work that you did in Make It So was talking about screens, but we're moving into a time where we're going to have multiple computational devices, and some of them will have screens, but some of them won't. So as an experienced designer and someone who thinks about these things and has been thinking about them for a while, where do you think we're headed as we move toward this sort of screenless interface?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for acknowledging how much I've accomplished in my short 23 years on this planet. Give or take 23 years. No, seriously. I think that what your question really speaks to something that is at the heart of evolution of design, evolution of interaction design, evolution of even technology, and that is, in the beginning, we're wowed by physical things that are easy to see, features, the stuff that, is cool or not. What we eventually found in our research with Make It So, but what we start to see in movies like Moon and Her, is that the things that have the biggest impact really on the story and the things that are the most interesting in the system of the narrative aren't the gadgets. They're not the screens or the products or the things you hold in your hand. They're all having to do with the relationships that are being established between technology and technology, between people and people, between people and technology or company, etc. And that's really at the heart of why experience design, I think, has become important. The quantitative kinds of value, economic value, features, performance, the things that every business person knows and engineers focus on and product managers are also focusing on, those things are important, but they're only enabling something that is vastly more important and vastly more valuable, and that is all the qualitative parts of relationship, the things that go beyond price and performance, and build a connection with ourselves, either as customers or audience or creators or constituents. On an emotional level, they speak to our values or not, and they help us develop meaning in the world. And all those things don't reduce down to numbers. They're not easily measured, and they require a different set of tools in order to understand, build, work with, and realize.
That's great. Nathan Shedroth, thank you so much for joining us on the Science Fiction Prototyping Podcast. As always, it is a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm just a big fan of your work. Thanks, Nathan.
My pleasure.
It's always good talking to Nathan. I think Nathan hit on the point that gets teased out, that especially in Spike Jonze's movie, Her. He talks about relationship-based computing, that for really the longest time, the relationship that we've had with our technology and with our software and hardware has really been command and control. We would ask the device or the machine to do something for us, and then it would do it. And it was this sort of back and forth. But I really do think in the 21st century, we've reached a time where it's evolved past that. We have enough computational power. We have the algorithms that have been able to evolve to the point where they can do much more. So we're not really doing command and control. What we're doing is a relationship-based compute. The I/O, the input-output, is based on relationships. And the good news there is that we have centuries of social scientists who have gotten an understanding of relationships, of how human beings act and interact with each other. And what I find very exciting, and I think what is found in the science fiction prototype of Jones's movie, and also even in our experimentation with our own little Darwin app, that's what's happening is we're taking the richness and the complexity of human beings and being able to get that into our technology so that we not only can use the technology to make our lives better, but we can even use that technology to make us better people. So I want to thank you for joining me on the Science Fiction Prototyping Podcast. As usual, if you have any ideas or any questions, you can always get in touch with me at brian.david.johnson@intel.com, or you can always follow me on Twitter. I am @IntelFuturist. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you on the next podcast.